Welcome to the problem solving section, the last in the leadership skills series. Before getting started, make sure you've watched the emotion regulation and communication sections. Problem solving is a complex process to use and even harder to teach kids and teens, and I'll be referring to emotion regulation and communication concepts throughout. Because problem solving can be so challenging and can change based on what the problem is, we find that it's easier to use the following steps to structure how to teach effective problem solving to youth. Now, you may remember from the emotion regulation section that we use the YES acronym to teach Quick Calm, a strategy to help kids relax their bodies. YES is actually part of a larger acronym that spells Yes, I Can. The reason we start our problem solving steps with emotion regulation is that often when faced with the first step is actually to calm down. Then you can objectively identify the problem, consider possible solutions, and analyze pros and cons. After that, you can tell yourself, now let's choose one to try. Alright, let's take a look at that first step of the problem solving portion of the sequence. Identify the problem. Often when faced with a problem, children and teens might jump straight into trying to find a solution before really understanding what the root of the issue is. When they get bad grades, for example, they might think that the problem is with the teacher's instruction and not their study habits, or when they argue with a parent, they might think the problem is their parents' restrictions and not their own behavior. Part of this goes back to that emotion regulation, or the lack of it, and the way negative emotions can color our ability to understand a situation. Again, that's why we recommend that YES piece first. Sometimes, though, the issue can come from the simple matter of not having stopped to really think about what that problem might be and where it comes from before starting to act out a solution. To truly identify a problem, it's important to clearly state what that problem might be, for example, getting bad grades, then also thinking about everything that might contribute to that problem, like the teacher's instructional style, study habits, trouble paying attention in class, etc. Remember to avoid focusing too much on things you can't change, like that teacher's boring lectures. Along the same lines, it's good to avoid placing blame, especially when problem solving as a team. That's not to say that you can't communicate with team members about changes that might help. It just means that simply placing blame without working constructively is more likely to create arguments than solutions. Okay, so now we've sat down, thought things through, and decided what the problem is. Next, it's time to brainstorm in the consider possible solutions step. Let's continue to use that bad grades example. Possible solutions might be studying more, changing sleep habits to be well rested before exams, asking friends to help, or looking for a tutor. The key to brainstorming in this sequence is to do so openly without rejecting any options just yet. That comes in the next stage when you weigh pros and cons. The reason for this is to help really understand the situation and bring all possible solutions to the table. So going back to our example, a student might be tempted to outright reject an option like going to the teacher after school and asking for help because he or she thinks the teacher will say no or worries that it'll be embarrassing. But after looking through the full list of pros and cons, that might actually end up being the best thing to try first. After making a full list of possible solutions, we'll want to analyze those solutions to see which one we should try first. It can be tough, even a bit overwhelming sometimes, to really get a grasp on what those pros and cons are, so we like to teach kids and teens to focus on 3 specific things: feasibility, or how well they can actually put the solution into action; outcome, or how likely the solution will be to fix the problem; and impact, or what the extra consequences might be. Taking these items into account, let's review our solutions. Studying more and changing sleep habits would be pretty easy to put in place, so they're good in terms of feasibility. They're reasonable in terms of outcome, but working independently might not help if the problem with grades is coming from difficulty comprehending the material. The impact is pretty minor, maybe losing a bit of free time. Asking friends to help or looking for a tutor might be a little less feasible depending on whether the student has a friend who's doing well in class or the resources to hire a tutor, but would bring a slightly better outcome if someone can effectively explain what the student is missing. The impact might be feeling a bit embarrassed to ask a friend or spending some money on a tutor, so these things are certainly reasonable to keep in mind. That last option, asking the teacher, is also probably pretty feasible as long as the teacher is available outside of class. It's the most likely to bring a good outcome if the teacher is willing to help and is more interesting outside of his or her lectures, and would have about the same amount of impact in terms of consequences as asking a friend. Takes a little bit of time, might be a little embarrassing, but generally not too costly. 2 quick pieces referring back to previous videos in this sequence. First, you'll notice I've mentioned embarrassment in the pros and cons of a few solutions. This is another area where emotion regulation is important. If a student is feeling nervous about a solution that's otherwise pretty good, they might miss out on taking the best route because they're not properly managing those feelings of anxiety. Second, possible solutions involving other people are by nature more complex because they rely on those communication skills to be successful. There will inevitably be times when working with others or asking for help is the best solution, another reason why effective communication skills are so important. Alright, now choose one and try it. This last step might seem pretty simple, but it's important to remind kids and teens that most of the time, the first solution they pick to a problem isn't going to fully solve the issue. So it's important to evaluate how successful the solution was and consider whether there's a need to go back through the problem-solving sequence again. Using our example, the student may try to change their study habits as a first step, then realize they're still not quite getting everything and decide to ask the teacher for help. This example is fairly simple, so it's easy to see how multiple solutions can be put into place at once, but more complicated problems might actually require starting back at the I, identifying the problem, after putting the solution in place. It may be that the first solution you tried helped, but didn't fully solve the problem, or that the solution helped you see that the nature of the problem was a little different than you thought. Our student might realize after improving their study habits and talking to the teacher that they're experiencing trouble paying attention in general. That larger problem is contributing to their academic issue in ways that they might not have seen right off the bat, and it requires slightly different solutions than the simpler problem of a few bad grades. Reminding youth up front that their first, second, even third attempts to putting solutions into place might not be 100% effective can help normalize it when things fall through and create a readiness to continue working through the problem-solving sequence until an appropriate solution is found and put into place. Here too, emotion regulation is essential. As we all know, trying and failing is a good learning experience, but can be really frustrating. Kids and teens finding their attempts at problem solving challenging should also remember to repeat the YES steps as needed. That concludes the problem solving section. Thanks for walking through the Leadership Skills series. Remember, these videos are available to you as a resource, so feel free to refer back to them as needed. Each section represents an important domain that can help enrich program content and arm youth with important tools to navigate their world, both now and as they move forward into adulthood. As you may have noticed, these skills are interrelated and built on each other, so while you're teaching communication, it might become clear that you need to review emotion regulation with your students. Similarly, while you teach problem solving, you may find that your kids need a refresher on communicating in teams. That's completely normal. Keep in mind that this material is abstract and complex, so as youth work to apply it to new concepts, it's helpful to review previous information to support deeper learning. Thanks for watching, and good luck!